So, I'm back from vacation, and I finally got a chance to see this. Oh boy. Oh boy. Is this the worst thing I've seen this year? No, I sat through Borderlands, Madam Web, and The Crow. This is not even close. Is it bad? Kind of. Is it misguided? Sure. But let's just dive right in, and honestly, I'm just going to do a spoiler talk of this for this entire review because there is no way I can talk about this movie without spoiling some stuff. So if you've not seen this movie at this point, maybe check the movie out, maybe don't. But yeah, this is going to be a spoiler talk. So Joker Folie Deux was directed by Todd Phillips and stars Joaquin Phoenix once again returning as Arthur Fleck, also known as Joker. Also features Lady Gaga, Brendan Gleeson, and Catherine Keener. And in this movie taking place a couple years after the events of the first Joker movie, Arthur Fleck is now in Arkham Asylum and he's going on trial because of the events of the first Joker movie. And he meets Harley Quinzel basically and begins falling in love with her, and things get a little more complicated as things go along. At least that's what the trailers tell you what the movie's about, but the movie itself is actually very different than what you'd expect. So I actually still defend the first Joker movie. I thought Joaquin Phoenix was excellent in that movie. I thought it was a very unique take on the story of Joker and kind of like of Gotham itself. I thought it was a very well done movie overall, kind of a surprise from Todd Phillips overall. I thought it was a very fascinating movie, and I definitely look back on it and I'm like, this is still pretty intriguing. It's still pretty intense. And having rewatched it again after the first, having rewatched it again before this movie, I definitely thought it was very interesting still. And I keep forgetting, this is actually one of the first movies I actually reviewed on my channel all the way back in like 2019. So going into this movie, I knew a lot of things about it. I knew it was going to be a musical. I knew, Lady Gaga was going to be in it. And I've heard a lot of things about this movie. I heard when it debuted at the film festival, it did not get glowing reviews. When I heard that, I immediately was like, so what? The critics didn't really care for the first Joker movie, so am I really surprised that critics don't really like this new movie? And so, what fascinated me more with the reaction to it was the audience. It's one thing if critics hate your movie. I feel like most people won't give a crap about what critics say about a movie. Audiences, on the other hand, people will care what audiences say about a movie. This movie has gotten a lot of really bad scores. It's gotten the worst scores for like a major comic book movie in a while. We're lowered on Rotten Tomatoes, low on Cinema Score, lower on Post Track. Everything is just shocking how bad these scores are. Yikes! This is bad. This is embarrassing. And so I still wanted to give this movie a chance. I was like, am I not gonna like this as much as the first Joker movie? And am I gonna hate it as much as everyone else? And honestly, here's what I'll say. Do I hate this movie as much as everyone else? No. Do I like it enough to recommend it? No. This is going to be a pretty rough review. And again, I'm spoiling stuff because I cannot I cannot really talk about this movie without spoiling it. So it's going to be a pretty long video. So I'll start off with things I do like. Once again, Joaquin Phoenix is still really good as Arthur Fleck. You still feel bad for his character. I feel like he's good, but you also kind of feel annoyed at times. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. Lady Gaga, I thought she was pretty good as Lee in this movie. She and Joaquin Phoenix, I did believe their chemistry for a good portion of the movie. Among some of the side actors, I don't even say there's no real bad performance. Like Brendan Gleeson gives a good performance. Catherine Keener, Zazie Beetz when she appears. Also Lee Gill, who also was in the first movie as the short comic that Arthur worked with. He returns in this movie and he gives a very good performance for his one scene. He was really good. This movie is also absolutely gorgeous. Like the first movie, it is absolutely beautiful to look at. It's like, even if the story itself is not very well thought out, it's actually a very pretty movie to look at. And I do think there are a lot of really intriguing ideas that are brought up in this movie about, this dual character that Arthur has, about how they kind of everyone in this movie kind of uses Arthur in some way. It is kind of interesting to see, and also kind of like, how people kind of like worship figures that they shouldn't be worshiping. It is fascinating if you bring it up, but I'm going to talk about some of those things later on. And also, I do think there are some very good moments in this movie. Of the musical numbers, there are two that I really like. There's one where they're kind of dancing in this fantasy sequence where they're kind of just like, kind of ballroom dancing around a Hotel Arkham sign. It's like, that was very well done. It's not much, but it was very beautiful to look at. There's also a very long extended one where at one point Joker does tap dance at one point. It was kind of fascinating, but it definitely is more of a distraction. But again, I'm going to talk about the musical sequences in this movie because there's a lot to say about the music in this movie. And also, one of my favorite sequences is actually the very opening of this movie, which is just a animated Looney Tunes esque sequence, which is just kind of funny to me. It does kind of bring up a lot of the ideas that are kind of brought up later in this movie. Now that I think about it, about how this whole character may be there may be a dual. You know, Arthur and Joker are very separate people and such. And I do think it is kind of interesting when you kind of see that opening sequence. And then you kind of watch the movie. If you do go back and watch this movie and watch the sequence again, it is kind of interesting to see that. But that's pretty much everything that I liked about the movie. Let's talk about a lot of the stuff I don't like about this movie. First off, the music. Now, when I heard a lot of people were coming back, it's like, okay, I'm glad a lot of these people were coming back. But particularly, I was really excited for Hildur Gotnadir to return to this, to compose the music for this movie. It's like, oh, her music in that movie was incredible. Her music in this movie is a lot more disappointing because she just rehashes pretty much all the score from the first movie. So it's just kind of annoying that there really isn't anything new done with the music, aside from the musical numbers. Let's talk about the musical numbers. They're awful. Most of them are just awful. There's no reason for any of the musical numbers to happen. It's all just a delusion at this point, and we all kind of know that it's a delusion. And there's really no reason for it. They're just covers of songs sung horribly, which is weird because, you know what, Lady Gaga, you know, great singer, Joaquin Phoenix, he played Johnny Cash. And it's embarrassing just hearing these musical numbers sung this way. And it's just really embarrassing. They're like during one where Joaquin Phoenix is singing and he's kind of like walking around the other inmates and such. I honestly started cringing. Like, I had to lean back in my seat and kind of tilt away. Yikes. And one of the interesting things about the first Joker movie was trying to figure out, you know, what was real and what wasn't real. This movie, I think it's clearly obvious that the musical sequences are just not there. They're not actually happening. And it takes away a lot of the mystery from the first movie. And when these musical numbers just happen, they just slow the movie down. There's really no reason for this movie to even be a musical. And I've heard a lot of people say this, but I'm going to reiterate too, because I do agree with it. If they were using their own songs, like if they wrote these own songs, it would have been more interesting. But instead, they're just really bad jukebox covers that you would hear on karaoke night at a bar at 2 a.m. It is embarrassing. It is bad. It is sad. But let's talk about some of the other characters, because some characters in this movie are just awful. I mean awful. But then again, everyone's kind of awful to Arthur in the first movie, so it's not really that surprising. But there's really no reason for any of these characters. Brendan Gleeson's character, there's a few things brought up with his character that could have been fully developed a little bit more. And basically it's about how, you know, all these guards at Arkham are abusing the inmates and such, and that could be really fascinating and such. Well, they don't really go in depth with that. Arthur kind of mentions it at one point in a courthouse, and nobody does anything about it. Okay. Catherine Keener is actually Arthur's lawyer. They don't really do anything with her character. Like, she kind of cross-examines a few people, including Zazie Beetz' character from the first movie, and she's fired about halfway through. She doesn't really have much of a personality. Harry Lawty, he plays Harvey Dent, which, okay, this could be really fascinating. And the only really fascinating thing they do was, towards the end of the movie, there was an explosion at the courthouse. And camera kind of moves over to, we can't tell if Harvey Dent is dead or alive, but it's clearly he's not conscious at the moment. But you can clearly tell that his face is kind of covered a bit, kind of implying that he will be Two-Face eventually, which that could be really interesting if the movie developed his character a little bit more. The reason why Aaron Eckhart was so interesting as Harvey Dent was because they actually developed his character a lot more than they did here. But we'll talk about The Dark Knight in a little bit. But Lady Gaga as Lee. Oh boy, her character is just horrible. Her character is horribly written. You kind of would expect from the title of the movie, which the subtitle means, like, you know, madness for two, like they're sharing these delusions and such. But they never really develop her insanity that well. She's in there just because she's kind of in there. She's clearly a psychopath. Her parents basically said she was a psychopath and such. And she does various things in this movie that you would think, you kind of see in the trailer, like, oh, she throws a garbage can through a business, steals one of the TVs. So that's supposed to be like an insane moment. But really, it was just kind of her kind of just messing around. I feel like they never really fully developed her character, and you can kind of see that there were so many moments in this movie that were just kind of just removed entirely. Like, there's one sequence in the trailer, you kind of see them walking down the steps, and they're kind of, kicking around and such, like, what Arthur did in the first movie as Joker. And that scene is just cut entirely. That scene is just randomly cut. I don't understand why. But also, in addition to being a musical, it's also a courtroom drama. The courtroom stuff is stupid. Like, really, really stupid. They rehash a lot of the stuff from the first movie. I'm not just saying, oh, they talk about stuff from the first movie. They kind of rehash a lot of similar plot points to the first movie. I'm getting really sick of this. Why do movies feel like they need to rehash stuff from the first movie? Why do sequels feel like they need to do that? Okay, I can at least kind of understand it when something like, say, Star Wars Force Awakens did it. But some of these movies are not even a decade old, and yet they're rehashing stuff from the original movie. It is absurd to me. But anyway, back to the courtroom stuff. The courtroom stuff makes absolutely no sense. So about halfway through the movie, Arthur fires his lawyer, and the court just allows this. Not only do they allow Arthur to represent himself, and not only does the judge pretty much allow him to dress up as the Joker in his own trial, but he also allows him to basically have no witnesses, no defense whatsoever. Even someone like me, who has never gone to law school, knows this court is absolutely insane. This judge is absolutely insane. Why would you also allow Lee to be very close to Arthur during these court hearings? I have never gone to law school. How do I know more about the law than anyone in this trial? Also, there's like one moment towards the end of the movie where it's about where the verdict reading and such, with a verdict reading, and one of the jurors says, "We, the people of New York," it's like, you're in Gotham City, you're not in New York. And they just left that in the movie. And also, again, going back to a lot of stuff that kind of like, kind of destroying the first Joker in some way. Again, the ambiguity of the first movie was very interesting. There is no ambiguity in this movie whatsoever. None at all. It's just all gone. I was never intrigued by like what was going on. I was never thinking, it's like, is this actually happening or not? Because it's clearly obvious the only thing that was not happening were the musical numbers. And also, pretty much, there are a lot of intriguing themes in this movie that aren't really fully developed. Like, a lot of these character actions are never fully explained. Some stuff with Lady Gaga is not really explained. Brendan Gleeson, again, not really explained. Catherine Keener, not really explained either. And it's all kind of just more, let's just shit on Arthur, which is basically what the first movie was. So, doesn't really make sense. And also, some things that Arthur does in this movie just don't make any sense. Especially in the third act. And some of the ideas are very interesting as well. Like, okay, so there's an argument that Catherine Keener makes about, like, or was it her? I honestly don't remember. I honestly don't care. Someone makes an argument in the court about how there's two personalities. There's Arthur Fleck and there's Joker, and there might be a split personality there. It is kind of interesting, and you kind of, again, when you go back to that cartoon at the beginning of the movie, there is kind of an idea there about Joker being separate from Arthur in a way, kind of in this Peter Pan-esque, weird, surreal kind of way, kind of Looney Tunes as cartoon. But it doesn't really work because I feel like they don't really do much with it. And also, there's this whole thing towards the end of the movie. If you've seen the movie, you already know what I'm talking about. He renounces his whole Joker persona. Basically, Lee was in love with him because of Joker, not really because of Arthur, which could be interesting. Kind of a twist on the whole how Joker and Harley's relationship is. But at the same time, a lot of it kind of doesn't really work. It just feels like it just falls flat. It doesn't quite work out for me. Like how Arthur's like, I renounce this whole thing. It just feels like there was no reason, no purpose whatsoever. Like he saw someone that he recognized get hurt, but I never really cared for that character to begin with. So why should I care that you care if you don't really develop anything? Um and also, let's talk about that last scene, the death of Arthur Fleck. It doesn't really make sense when you really think about it. So at the very end, somehow he's back in Arkham Asylum, kind of like basically nothing changed in this movie. And so he's told, "Oh, hey, you got a visitor." It was it really a visitor, or was there no visitor? Was he just kind of imagining this? I feel like he wasn't at this point. Um, but someone comes up to him. Some random inmate comes up to him and basically, kills him, gives him the permanent smile and such. He's laughing and such, kind of implying that he may be, Heath Ledger's Joker even, or someone similar to him in some way. Now, I was never on the side of saying, oh yeah, this character is definitely the Joker. I was always in the mindset that that Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal of this character was more someone who would eventually kind of inspire someone to do heinous acts, kind of like saw at the end of that movie, that someone was inspired to kill Bruce's parents at the end of the movie. In this movie, someone is just randomly brought in to just kind of do this heinous thing, and we don't really understand like why they do it. It's just kind of a thing. It makes no sense. No sense whatsoever. The idea is there, but I just kind of said this about Megalopolis. Like, just because you have an idea, it doesn't mean like it's going to be fully there. And that's kind of how I feel about this movie. There is an idea that maybe this movie was supposed to be made this way. That it was supposed to be this bad. That it was supposed to be intentional in what it was trying to do. Or in some cases, not doing. In that, Todd Phillips didn't really want to do this movie and such. I can kind of see that, honestly. Like, you can definitely tell at times that it's like nothing really makes sense in a bad way. Unlike the first movie where it's like nothing makes sense in a good way. But this movie, it's like the creative choices in this movie just don't really add up. And a lot of the story elements just don't add up. And they're kind of like throwing all this stuff out there saying, screw you guys for saying all this stuff about Joker, screw you guys for praising him and such. It's just kind of odd. It's like a lot of the stuff doesn't really work because it's all kind of just thrown in there. It's a strange mixture of a musical, a courtroom drama, a comic book movie, and it's just kind of, I don't want to say it's a disaster. I still think Madam Web is the worst comic book movie of the year, but I would say this is probably the more disappointing comic book movie of the year, because I was excited for Deadpool, I enjoyed that. I was not looking for Madam Web, and I hated that. And I was definitely looking forward to this, and I am close to hating it. I won't go as far as to say this is one of the worst things I've seen. I can definitely see there's a few ideas here, there are a few good performances here, and there are some creative ideas that are just kind of thrown in there. But to me, this is just a giant misfire. Just pretty much every idea is just an idea that is not really fully developed. It's like, oh, it could be a musical. Well, we're not going to write original songs, and we're also going to sing horribly. There are some great actors in this movie, but their characters are kind of just horrible, and also they have no reason to really be in this movie. We are introducing a bunch of ideas that could really be fully developed, but we're never actually going to fully develop them. The court scenes are just absolutely insane. The ambiguity, gone. The third act, it falls apart. Like, I was at least kind of on board for the first first half of this movie, but around beginning of the third act, I'm like, this is just a lot. This is just not working, and it's just such a shock that I guess it's not really a shock when you think about it, because the first Joker felt pretty open and shut. Like, there was a reason why they kind of didn't want to make a sequel to this movie. And so they go and make this sequel that is just insane for the wrong reasons. It It's a musical that's not really a musical. It's a courtroom drama. It's not really a courtroom drama. It's a comic book movie. It's not really a comic book movie. It's a movie that's like, oh, it's going to do all these sorts of things and talk about all these sorts of things, but all of it's going to feel half-baked and nothing's really going to feel worth it. I would say this is kind of only really worth watching just to kind of say that you did see it. Like, I wouldn't go as far as to say this is a skip it, but I think this is worth watching at some point. Whenever it hits Max, that's probably the best place to watch this movie. Because at least you won't have to worry about spending so much money on a movie like this, and you won't have to be mad walking out of the theater thinking you just wasted your time. But then again, that's kind of a skip it. But it's like, it's a fascinating kind of failure of a movie. Again, I don't want to say skip it because, again, performances are solid. It looks great. There are a few good moments here and there. But I will give Joker Folie 1.5 out of 4 stars. Stream it. How is a Transformers movie better than this? Or Megalopolis, for that matter? Meant to say that at the end of Megalopolis, but that video is already running too long. Kind of like this video is too. I'm looking at the time right now. So, how would you rank all the performances of Joker? Comment down below. Subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Actually, no. What is the most shocking disappointment to you for this year so far? You know, we only have a few weeks left in the year, but what is the most shocking disappointment of 2024? Movie-wise, at least. Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Yeah.